born in the 1900s, she was a wild and beautiful woman whose career as a writer was largely overshadowed by her husband, F. Scott Fitzgerald, writer of The Great Gatsby. Some of you might know him. She was later diagnosed with schizophrenia, taken to an insane asylum where she died when it burned down in 1949.
Okay, and is there anyone here who doesn't know who Anne Frank is? Great, see me after.
And this is a telephone conversation between them.
The world was soaked in gasoline. Men were convening with overflowing boxes full of matches, convinced that this was the final solution.
I fit right in with all the chaos. Sometimes I would wake up talking to myself. I would feel this warm sensation over my body as that I would begin to dream. My skin would stick to my nightgown as the sky outside would curl into my windows. My husband would roll over in bed as his mouth meticulously moved on cue with the choir of crickets. In my dreams, I was a goddess with 8 arms, holding up diamonds encased in amber gold, littering my mouth, dripping, puddling underneath my sky. Scott would wake up next to me. Ugh, Zelda, again? Yet he would flick on a light, take out a pen, and write down all of my ideas to add to his collection of novels, yet that man never got my story quite right. You see, I didn't want to be Daisy Buchanan, lover of the great Jake Gatsby. I wanted to be magic. And at the time, the American dream said that if I wasn't a minority or foreign or starving in the Great Depression, that I could raise myself up somehow, possibly far enough into space. I wanted my body to be in orbit. I wanted to escape the psychosis of our times.
They were taking the gypsies.
They were drawing controversial images of cats.
The Jehovah's Witnesses.
Insulin, curled legs are on flesh and sugar seduced.
The beggars.
I threw an anchor at the Steamboat Willie.
The homosexuals.
Dada and Hemingway were always drunk, singing in my shower.
They were taking the Polish.
King Tut walked out of his tomb straight into my living room.
The criminals.
I tap danced with Mickey Mouse. And I ate pancakes with Charles Lindbergh in Paris.
The Serbs, the non-complying Germans.
Masterpieces were freckling themselves over my skin, creating permanent places on my pores. But the myriad eccentric and loosely guarded phenomenons escaped me.
And the Jews. We were waiting to be taken, so my family ran.
Everything began to drown me. Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, Tallulah, the music, the jazz, the roaring 20s, it was liquefying at the bottom of my ankles. But I found a way to breaststroke to debutante houses.
In the depth of the night, the dark swallowing our bodies, feet slipping from shoes, no time to fall back into them, I left my cat for a room behind a bookcase.
I distracted myself with parties, plie, piston, pirouette. I allowed men to sneak their way past Scott into my bathtub, where we would culminate liquid poetry on our skin. Our bodies became an art form. Surrealism, expressionism. Sometimes we got wild, it would be Art Deco with shark skin over our nude bodies, yet I could never perfectly conflate with anyone.
We were confined to the fresh air of a small window whose curtains couldn't be bothered lest a neighbor noticed the flutter and the Nazis come rushing in. Every tiptoed whisper was breathed with care of the 300,000 families. We wanted our steps to be the lightest.
The distractions weren't loud enough. And I'm telling you the truth, I would sit silently in chapels praying like a good woman when all of a sudden I would see elephants skyrocketing through the stained glass windows, knocking down the crucifixes, and all the grayscale portraits and films, there'd be blurs of color, and on those buildings I could picture myself running off them, building nests in the air molecules through a kaleidoscope I watched as a Negro hang in Amsterdam, hang like decorations on each other's shoes, as a fallacious pile up in Germany with the skeletons who were still occupied in the music with the veterans in Portland, who wear her back to space. Those southern bells, they walked past the starving children who were as moved in the bells rang to ask another angel to return to heaven, as
the one whose words fit perfectly in the space that would hold them.
I wasn't crazy. Didn't you see them? Didn't you see those self-exiled, arrogant writers who were sipping scotch around the Algonquin round table as the desolate vagabond families were asleep on the streets of Greenwich Village? As the Native Americans were told to cut off their hair and give up a cultural identity, and Langston Hughes was writing poetry about the black activists who were hung on the swing sets of childhood playgrounds. And now you sit as hipsters mocking our era with your long cigarettes. You're listening to your record players with your flapper dresses on, trying to mock an era I so desperately wanted to escape, but you couldn't mimic that era better than I could. My brain was a perfect poster for the chaos of the time, and for that you caged me.
That's when they found us, sitting cross-legged and silent like roots in a garden. I found the eyes of my father lifting easy as a poem, our arms grasped by strangers. We boarded a train to face delirium. They left the doors unlocked, but that didn't matter much. I watched a film reel through a window, the Queen Anne's lace flowers, the telephone wires, the children, the villages. It was like freedom.
In spring, we heard the sirens ringing, whistling us our favorite tune. Every entirely white-walled room began to grow with red gardenias and red poppies, the vines sprinkled over our bookcases, hanging off the chandeliers, reaching underneath our kneecaps. Every sensation felt warm. The trees got scared. I saw them lifting up their skirts to run faster. It didn't make sense.
Not even to me.
We all thought that the fire was just another delusion, that we were crazy, so we welcomed it.
My mother was on fire. I was sure of it.
The barriers were knocked down. The walls turned to debris that we flew in the air like confetti.
My father was on fire.
Finally, insanity had its advantage, because every scream sounded like the pitter-patter of the flapping of bees' wings running through a garden, and every scream and every suffering and every warm sensation again that I felt growing in my womb felt like a warm cup of tea with the honey being stirred and the steam rising upward.
My neighbor, my friend.
Finally, I could place a hand on my womb, and I could feel a hot body I could relate to.
My soul was on fire. Together, I saw mountains, elating airwaves, arms waving goodbye.
Ancestors were whispering us the passing of time, the lassitude of minutes, sweetly serenading us a love song, goodbye.
They were saying more words than have ever been spoken, by mouths or by body language or by families of birds teaching each other to fly.
Bones were crystals. Our rib cages, our memory was a fine-grained silk. And finally, I could blow away somewhere, light as cells glimmering in sunlight coming in through bedroom windows.